Hello there. I'm Dark Rufus. Unfortunately, my universe was coming to an end, so I had to find a new home. That means getting rid of Rufus from this universe. The ultimate sacrifice of r/Rufus. Ashes to ashes, subs to dust. Hopefully you have a thing for scary and creepy stories. If not, well, I hear good things about the Rufus Reddit universe. If you're too scared, click the link in the description and check out Rufus Reddit, and if not, let's begin. Serious. Night owls. What is the creepiest thing that happened to you when everyone else was sleeping? Story 1. So I was home alone at 2 a.m. as my parents were out at a yearly company event, which always drags out into the wee hours of the morning, and I was cleaning my house as a surprise for my parents so they'd come home to a spotless house. They've worked hard. They've earned their night out, and I was honestly enjoying myself as I had my tunes on and was lost in thought. All the lights were on, so even though it was night, there wasn't a dark, spooky corner to make me feel uncomfortable. This is important for later. As I'm cleaning, I think I heard a door creak. I shut off the music, and sure enough, I hear creaking again. I go out into the hallway, and it's the door to my sister's room creaking open. The light in her room is off, which I immediately found odd as I hadn't even gone into her room since it didn't need any cleaning. I figured the light was always off, or maybe I forgot to shut it off. There wasn't much in the way of when, but the doors have been known to open and close sometimes on their own. Offhandedly, I say aloud, "Hey, could you close the door? I'd appreciate it." The door begins to creak closed, which at first started giving me chills, but I dismissed it, thinking I must have just timed my words to when it would start creaking closed. So I added, "Actually, it's cool. You can keep it open." It started opening up again, creaking ever so slowly. I was starting to get creeped out, so I decided to just walk past and ignore it, chalking it up to my imagination getting the better of me. I didn't feel like putting my tunes back on, so as I cleaned, I kept hearing the door creak again and again. And every time it was just the door to my sister's room. Starting to get tired and almost sure it was just the wind or something, I passed by it and saw it more open than before and pitch black inside. I didn't stick around to look inside and just commented in an offhand tone, "Just close the door already. Cool, thanks, ghost." Slam. I nearly jumped out of my skin and immediately turned around to see the door to my sister's room closed shut. My eyes were wide and my heart was racing. Everything was so silent and calm that I had trouble believing I was so absolutely terrified. What scared me the most is the fact that my sister's room has a door where you need to turn the knob to fully close it. Otherwise, the little metal piece that keeps the door closed makes it bounce off the frame, unless you slammed it hard enough to bypass the resistance of the metal spring in the knob. The other thing that absolutely terrified me and made me go into my room and wait for my parents to come back home was that under the edges of the door into her room, the light was on. I understand how the ghosts would slam the door. After all, they were trying to be helpful, but this dude was just testing their patience. Story 2. I used to live in the middle of the country, in Arkansas. I lived alone at the time at a property my mother would rent out occasionally. It was a large 3-bedroom home with 2 stories. This house was right on the highway. A dirt road connected to that highway and led to the houses that were a few acres behind my own. It was around midnight one night when I was still awake in the room where I kept my PC. All the lights were off. Suddenly I could have sworn that I heard voices in the front porch of my home. My PC room was connected to that porch by a window. I immediately tensed up and listened. I couldn't make much out, but I was still so sure I heard someone speaking. Another detail about the house at the time was the front door and most of the windows, thank God not the case for the one in my office, didn't have blinds or any means to cover them. Up to this point, since I lived in the middle of nowhere, I didn't lock my doors most of the time either. Looking back, I think I had my front door locked, but at the time I couldn't remember if it was. There were far too many exposed windows to just walk up to them and lock them too, at least in my paranoid mind that night. Most of my lights were off, thankfully, so I slipped back to my bedroom, which was down a hallway, grabbed my shotgun, against Arkansas, locked the door to my bedroom and waited. I still remember putting my iPhone at the base of the door, turning on the camera, and using it to see out into the connecting hallway in case someone had come inside. Thankfully, I never saw anyone. I finally fell asleep a few hours later. Later, though, I heard about a neighbor on my dirt road had a son who had been arrested in another state. Their son had broken out and fled back home to that exact house around the time I heard those voices on my porch. He'd been tracked down eventually and arrested there, only half a mile from my home. Story 3. So to start, let me make it clear I was young, naive, and trying to be helpful. I was working a night shift at a customer service job when I was young. I'm male and lightweight, and I don't really work out. I never carry anything for self-defense because I don't really have much on me that I consider valuable to lose. I also didn't think much of it. I believe it was a weekend and there were quite a few bars nearby, so I wasn't concerned about being robbed, to be honest. So I get off about 2 a.m. and am working in Syracuse, New York. Someone came up to me after I got in my car and asked if I had a lighter. I just politely explained I didn't, and so he asked if he could hitch a ride down the street. And for whatever reason, I thought, sure, why not? I was kind of bored and wanted to see where this could take me. In hindsight, this was a dumb idea. Well, down the street about a quarter mile, this guy asks me to pull over and he gets out of the vehicle. It becomes clear to me that this guy's homeless. He walks over to the bus stop and takes out a makeshift cigarette and lighter from a hiding spot he made. He walks back over to the car and asks for a ride back since he doesn't have any transportation. At this point, I said whatever. Again, I have no clue why I was stupid enough to go along with this. So he gets back in. I drive down the road and he asks me to stop and pull over so he can get out. He was actually pretty chill up to this point, and we had some cool conversations. But as soon as we pulled over, he just kind of stopped being cool and just stared straight and wouldn't say a word. Immediately, my heart sank, and I thought I was dead. I just looked over at him and asked if he was good a few times, and then said, "Have a good night. I gotta get home." Whatever episode he was having, he seemed to snap out, say thanks, and get out of the car. I'm like 80% sure if I panicked, it would have escalated it and hurt me. He just had that look like he was about to do something awful but couldn't muster up the courage to do it. And I like to think that me being personable enough kept him from doing it. Or maybe he just couldn't see anything of value. Now I just have a no-hitch policy. It seems kind of messed up, especially since I can honestly say I was at fault here. But since then, I just don't feel comfortable giving strangers rides. Story 4. I'm a night auditor at a hotel. One night at around 3 a.m., the phone starts ringing, and the caller ID shows room 112, which is the hotel's fitness center. I pick up the phone and all I hear is heavy breathing from the other end. Since all the rooms are outside entrance only, I lean over while still on the phone and look out the security window towards the door to the fitness center. The door is closed and the lights are turned off. After not getting a response, I then ask, "Is everything okay?" And immediately afterwards, the phone clicks. Without taking my eyes off the door, I leave the office and head over to the fitness center. I shine a flashlight in through the window to inspect the room, which is empty. I walk in and look around the small room. Yep, it is empty. I checked the phone and the handset was still on the receiver, then headed back to the office, and as soon as I sat down, the phone started ringing again. The caller ID said room 112. I whispered to myself, pick up the phone and immediately hang up. Nothing else happened after that. There is CCTV in the manager's office, which is directly above the front desk, and at the time of night, I'm the only one on staff at the hotel. If there was anyone in that office, you'd be able to hear the footsteps. As far as the caller ID is concerned, our console shows where the call is coming from, in-house or external. If a number was saved as a contact for room 112, it would still display the full phone number underneath the contact name. It's funny to think anyone in management would try something like this, but I doubt anyone up there is even tech-savvy enough to mess with a phone system, let alone access the CCTV from home. Well, it's a fitness center, so heavy breathing would probably be a normal thing during operating hours. But at night, damn. Story 5. I worked overnights at a gas station that was well lit, considering it my home away from home, and treated everyone nice except one person who pestered me once for declining her card. I can't decline it manually. So anyway, first things first, I'm mopping the back room areas an above and beyond thing for my boss, who used to even clean the ceiling vents. Like I said, home away from home. I come out to the front counter where the cigarette drawer that has all the cartons is hanging open. I immediately think I got robbed, so I lock the front doors to get into the back room to check the security footage. On the camera, the drawer opens on its own, which isn't possible since they'll shut on their own if left partially open, ensuring they only stay open if pulled all the way out. Feeling a bit creeped out but glad I wasn't robbed, I got to the front door, which is one of those twisting locks. I grab the lock to unlock it by twisting when a loud clunk occurs, and suddenly the lock is jammed shut. I called my assistant manager to inform her, and while on the phone, using all my might to unlock the lock, there were 3 customers outside just laughing at this gas station clerk locked inside their store. To whatever ghost masterminded that plan, damn good job. You got me good. Story 6. When I was in high school, I was walking home late from my then-boyfriend's apartment. It was about a 30-minute walk, and about 10 minutes from home, I noticed a man walking about 200 meters behind me. We were the only ones walking that street. No biggie. I wasn't paranoid at the time. All of a sudden, he's right behind me. He must have power walked or something to catch up to me that fast. I didn't think much of it, and figured he'd walk by given that he'd caught up to me so fast. Boy, was I wrong. If I sped up, so did he. If I slowed down, he did as well. He kept about 3 meters behind me for several minutes. Picked up my phone and called my mom. Thank heavens she was awake. She was waiting for me to come home. Considering how close he was, I wasn't able to tell her someone followed me, and I was determined not to show him I was afraid. I imagined that if I started running, I was done for. He kept following me down into the street I lived on, and the thing here is that the streetlights never worked, so it was 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles of darkness. Well, I lived a couple of hundred meters up to this street, and I kept on talking to my mom on the phone. I noticed he'd come even closer. and we were about to enter the darkest part of the street, which was directly outside my house. We had a huge hedge that blocked out a lot of light. I told my mom, "Yeah, I'm outside now. See you in 10 seconds. And I swear in my future grave that I felt him brush my jacket as he took a U-turn to my neighbor's yard. I knew my neighbors, though. He did not live there. Once inside my own yard, I ran as silently as I could up to the house and hid behind the wall. I peeked out and I saw him walk past, looking for me. It could have been nothing. It could have been about to harm me. Who knows? To this day, even in broad daylight, I freak out if people walk behind me. I usually find a lame excuse, like picking up my phone, stopping to search my pockets, etc., to let people pass. I'm shaking a bit even as I'm writing this. Story 7. I was working from home, third shift, and about 2 a.m., I heard the stuff in the coat rack in the living room rattle like it does when the door opens. I thought it might be my cat climbing in the coats, and I went to get her down and found not a cat climbing things she knows she's not allowed on, but a person I didn't know standing in the middle of my living room. He demanded to know where his stuff was, and after insisting for about 5 minutes that I had no clue who he was, he threatened me. My phone was in my room, and I wasn't willing to turn my back on this guy, so I reached for the katana my mother had gotten me for my birthday, sitting against the wall behind me. I got to chase a man out of my apartment with an actual sword. I didn't call the police anymore. I'm pretty sure he was just a drunk guy who either walked into the wrong apartment or used to live in mine. He didn't hurt anything or take anything, and I really needed to get back to work. We have strict rules on how much time we can spend away from our desks, even when working from home. Unfortunately, the whole experience freaked me out so bad that I now keep the sword next to my bed in case of noises in the night. I also lock the door. Man, this girl has a katana? I'm jealous. I've always wanted to study the blade. You guys wouldn't happen to know where I could score a cool katana by any chance. If you do, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Tip me off with information if you do. Story 8. I recall that a few months ago I was on my 3DS when I heard my little 7-year-old brother calling my name. This wasn't uncommon, as he used to stay up a lot on his iPod watching YouTube and had questions about so-and-so things in-game, so I put on a shirt and went to check on him. He was lying on the couch under his blanket, his phone still playing Minecraft videos, when he looked at me and asked me to check his room for the knocking. I'm usually paranoid about this stuff happening anyway, so I went to look and turned on his light. As I glanced out the window, I saw a kid, not a man, just sitting there, smiling, looking like he just had the best day ever before running off. I ran to my brother and just scooped him up and took him to my parents' room to explain what happened, but they didn't believe me. I later learned that the neighbor's kid had been sneaking out at night to play with some other neighborhood kids and wanted to play a prank. Story 9. Call me weird, but sometimes when I can't sleep, I get bored and get out of bed. I go to the window and look out of it for a bit. I don't know, it just kind of calms me to see my backyard in the moonlight. I find it peaceful. Anyway, I was looking out the window and I saw a figure jump the fence. It was too big to be a cat. It was human-shaped. The person made the motion with their head that they were looking around frantically, and they hid behind a bush. I was petrified. For what seemed like an eternity, they stayed there. Then they ran to the other side of the backyard and jumped that fence over into my neighbor's. I never knew who it was or what they were doing. I always suspected that maybe they were being chased or something. It just really freaked me out. Story 10. A long time ago, when I was still a teen and living with my parents, I wanted to listen to some music, but it was quite late. I went downstairs to the garage and decided to listen to music in my car. After a while, it was quiet as I was deciding on the next CD to play when I heard what sounded like leaves crunching outside. I looked in my rear-view mirror and saw a figure coming up the driveway. The motion-activated floodlight in the garage did not illuminate as the figure approached the front door. I quickly and quietly headed back inside and went up to the kitchen, where I could get a view of the front door. It was still quite dark, but I could make out the shape of a person standing at the front door. I stood there for a moment before I heard a knock. Obviously, this is strange for a quiet neighborhood at 3 a.m. I reached for my phone and dialed the police. But after waiting for another minute that felt like an eternity, the person turns around and walks away back down the drive and into the street, being careful to avoid the only street light. Before the police arrived, he was gone. They started to search the area but found no one. One officer came to ask questions and get a description, but it was so dark I couldn't make out anything useful. To this day, I still have no earthly clue why this happened. Story 11. Oh, I've got 2 decent ones. The first one is the time I made the mistake of watching The Ring at 3 in the morning, back when I still lived in my great-grandmother's house, which she had insisted was haunted. As I was watching the film, scared out of my mind, I suddenly heard a loud crash from the basement. I must have jumped a foot in the air, but I calmed myself down by claiming it was probably my cat. So I looked over to the edge of the blanket I was lying on, only to find my cat even more panicked than I am. Now I'm telling myself that something was probably just off balance and finally fell over. Just a coincidence. I calmed myself down and resumed the film. Then, not 15 seconds later, I feel something. It felt like it was about the size of a hockey puck but shaped like the lens of a magnifying glass, slid into the blanket. I froze. It was right at the small of my back. I was too panicked to move. Then it started vibrating. I immediately took up off the stairs and hid in the bathroom for about an hour. After I'd calmed down, I went to try and see just what that even was, and I found not a trace of anything that shouldn't have been there. I did not sleep that night. The other time was either a vivid nightmare or a case of sleep paralysis or night terrors or whatever it's called. I had suddenly woken up in the middle of the night one day, only to find that I couldn't move my body. Don't panic, I remember telling myself. You know what this is, so just close your eyes and go back to sleep. And I tried, but then I started to notice a faint sound, like the high-pitched whine of a camera readying its flash. It just kept getting louder and louder and more high-pitched. Just when it was becoming truly unbearable, it just stopped. I thought that was the end of it, so I made the mistake of opening my eyes again. Now standing before me was a shadowy figure in the shape of a man. Trying to look directly at him felt like trying to stare at those little shadows. Those little flashes of movement that you see in your peripheral vision sometimes. It was uncomfortable. Even though I couldn't make out a face, it felt like he was trying to stare right through me, leering so maliciously. It felt like standing before a predator waiting to strike its prey. That's when I felt it. Something slowly dragging itself over me. A sensation like someone raking ice-cold soaking wet denim over my skin. Tendrils made of shadows were slowly but surely attempting to smother me, but still couldn't move. The tendrils finally reached my mouth. That's the last bit I remember. I abruptly woke up hours later, after the sun had come out, feeling like it had just happened 30 seconds ago. I've never experienced sleep paralysis since. Story 12. I'm a backshift security guard at a retirement home, and I'm starting to believe this place is haunted. I've been here since last September, and early on, one of the other guards, a lovely young woman named Charlotte, made a passing reference to this place being haunted. I laughed it off and treated it as a joke, but suddenly, she's seen things, and in the months since, I've started seeing it too. Strange shapes moving just at the corner of my vision when I'm alone or faces in open doorways that vanish when I try to focus on them. I brushed this all off, just the sleepiness catching up to me, right? A month or two ago, we had a resident pass away. His room is right behind where I'm sitting now. The doorway isn't 5 feet from me, and 2 weeks ago, while I'm alone and reading Reddit to stay awake, I felt someone tap my left shoulder. Other than me, there's 4 people in this wing. The resident I'm watching, whom I am directly facing, will be immediately aware if he leaves this room. Another resident who is senile and has a room in the corner is well within my view. Another resident is wheelchair-bound and rarely leaves his room, so I would know if he left. And a fourth is bedridden in the other room behind me. So unless the bedridden resident made a miraculous recovery, snuck out of his room, tapped my left shoulder when his room was on my right, then snuck back into his room before I could check, who tapped my shoulder? That brings us to tonight. The plumbing in Ambrose's, RIP, bathroom spontaneously started running earlier tonight, as if someone was in there using the washroom. As long as I knew him, Ambrose was bedridden. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What is the scariest true story you know? Story 4 will give you goosebumps. See you in that video.